The truth is, most people misunderstand this. They believe that a life of stability, of predictable routines and modest comforts, is the ultimate shield against the bitterness of regret. They mistake the absence of risk for the presence of peace. But beneath the surface of a quiet life, there is often a soul screaming for the vastness of the unknown, a heart that beats in sync with the distant drums of a destiny they are too terrified to claim. Consider the boy Santiago, a simple shepherd in the sun-drenched hills of Andalusia. He was a boy who had already defied the expectations of his family, trading the prestigious path of the priesthood for the dusty, wandering life of a traveler. He thought he knew the world because he knew the language of his sheep and the shifting shadows of the Spanish plains. He felt content, or so he told himself, as he found shelter in an abandoned, roofless church where a giant sycamore tree grew from the ruins of the sacristy. It was there, sleeping under the stars with his flock, that a recurring dream began to haunt his psyche, a dream of a child leading him by the hand to the great pyramids of Egypt, promising a hidden treasure. Most people would wake up, shake off the dust, and drive their sheep toward the next watering hole, dismissing the vision as a trick of the mind. But Santiago felt the weight of something ancient pulling at him. He sought out a gypsy woman, a creature of mystery and sharp eyes, who confirmed the dream's gravity but offered no map, only the demand for a tenth of the treasure. Then came the encounter that would shatter his world, an old man sitting on a bench in the town square of Tarifa, claiming to be Melchizedek, the king of Salem. This was no mere mortal, but a catalyst of the universe, appearing at the precise moment someone is about to give up on their personal legend. The old man spoke of the world's greatest lie, the belief that at some point, we lose control of what's happening to us, and our lives become controlled by fate. He challenged the boy to see that the universe is not a chaotic void, but a structured path designed to help those who dare to dream. Santiago looked at his sheep, the animals he knew by name, the life that was safe and certain, and then he looked toward the horizon of Africa. The choice was a violent internal rupture between the comfort of the now and the terrifying possibility of the maybe. He chose the maybe. He sold his flock, the only currency of his identity, and crossed the strait to Tangier, only to be met with the brutal reality of the world. Within hours, a silver-tongued thief stripped him of every coin he possessed, leaving him alone in a strange land where he couldn't even speak the language. The silence of the marketplace was deafening. He was a victim, a fool, a boy who had traded his life for a mirage. Yet, in that moment of absolute despair, the narrative of the human spirit began its transformation. Santiago didn't see a dead end, he saw a transition. He began to understand that the language of the world is not composed of words, but of omens, of sweat, and of the silent persistence that characterizes those who refuse to be broken by the first blow of reality. He found work with a crystal merchant, a man who had long ago buried his own dreams beneath the dust of his shop. For a year, the boy breathed life back into the merchant's stagnant world, teaching the man that to fear change is to fear life itself. The shop flourished because Santiago leaned into the soul of the world, realizing that every action, no matter how small, vibrates through the entire cosmos. The psychological intensity of this opening chapter of Santiago's life serves as a profound meditation on the nature of the call to adventure and the psychological barriers that prevent us from answering it. The story reveals that the first step toward any great achievement is the willingness to sacrifice the good for the great. Santiago's sheep represent the attachments we cling to, not because they are fulfilling, but because they are familiar. The King of Salem introduces the concept of the personal legend, a psychological framework suggesting that every individual has a unique purpose that the universe itself desires to see fulfilled. When Santiago is robbed in Tangier, the lesson is stark and unforgiving. The path to one's destiny is not a paved road but a gauntlet. The loss of his money was not a failure of his dream, but a stripping away of his ego. It forced him to move beyond the physical world of currency into the spiritual world of labor and observation. The crystal merchant serves as a cautionary archetype, the man who knows his dream, to visit Mecca, but refuses to achieve it because he fears that once the dream is realized, he will have no reason to continue living. This segment teaches us that the fear of success can be just as paralyzing as the fear of failure. Santiago's time in the crystal shop is a period of incubation, a necessary phase where the soul gathers the strength and resources needed for the next leap. It highlights that even in moments of apparent standstill, we are moving if we are learning the language of the world. The universe uses these periods of toil to test our resolve and to refine our perception of the omens that surround us. We learn that luck is often just the result of being prepared to recognize an opportunity when it arrives in the guise of hard work. The boy's journey reminds the listener that the world has a soul, and that soul is nourished by the happiness and fulfillment of the people who inhabit it. To deny one's dream is to deny the universe its own completion. Santiago's decision to leave the prosperous shop and head back into the desert, toward the pyramids he had almost forgotten, marks the transition from a man who works for survival to a man who lives for a mission. It is the moment the apprentice becomes a seeker, understanding that the only thing standing between him and his treasure is the shadow of his own doubt. The desert awaits, a vast, indifferent expanse that cares nothing for his history, only for his courage. He joins a caravan, a moving city of souls, each with their own destination, yet all bound by the same shifting sands. Among them is an Englishman, a man of books and intellect, searching for the secrets of alchemy. Their meeting contrasts two ways of knowing. The Englishman seeks the truth through the ancient texts of the masters, while Santiago seeks it through the observation of the wind and the behavior of the camels. This duality explores the tension between academic knowledge and lived experience, suggesting that while the Emerald Tablet may hold the secrets of the universe, those secrets are written in a language that can only be felt, never merely read. The caravan moves deeper into the heart of the Sahara, a place where the silence is so profound it becomes a presence. It is here that the boy begins to understand that the desert is not an obstacle, but a teacher. It demands a total presence of mind. A single lapse in attention can mean death. This environmental pressure forces a sharpening of the intuition, a thinning of the veil between the self and the soul of the world. As tribal wars begin to threaten the safety of the caravan, the tension escalates from a journey of discovery to a journey of survival. The boy realizes that his life is no longer just his own, it is tied to the movement of the stars and the shifting of the dunes. He is learning the first law of alchemy, that everything is one. The lead cannot become gold unless the alchemist himself undergoes a transformation. The journey to the pyramids is not a movement across space, but a movement inward, toward the core of his own being, where the treasure has always resided, waiting for the eyes that are clear enough to see it. The boy's integration into the caravan is a metaphor for the human condition. We are all part of a collective movement, yet our individual paths remain our primary responsibility. The Englishman's obsession with the masterwork and the elixir of life reflects the human desire to transcend mortality and limitation through external formulas. However, the story subtly critiques this approach by showing that the Englishman is blind to the beauty of the desert because his nose is buried in his books. Santiago, conversely, learns to read the desert like a book. He sees the omens in the flight of two hawks, sensing a coming attack on the oasis of Al-Fayoum. This ability to perceive the unspoken language is the hallmark of a soul in alignment with the universe. It suggests that information is not just found in data, but in the rhythm of life itself. The lesson here is one of total immersion. To truly understand a thing, one must become a part of it. The desert, with its lethal beauty and unforgiving heat, serves as the ultimate crucible. It burns away the superfluous, the pride, the fear, the attachments, until only the essence remains. Santiago's arrival at the oasis, a place of peace and water amidst the chaos of war, represents the moments of respite and love that sustain us on our journey. It is here that he meets Fatima, and the narrative takes on a new layer of psychological complexity. He is faced with the ultimate temptation, to abandon the quest for the sake of love. He believes he has found his treasure in her eyes, and for a moment, the pyramids seem irrelevant. But the wisdom of the desert, and later the Najiakim himself, teaches him that true love never prevents a man from pursuing his personal legend. If it does, it is not true love, but the language of possession. This realization is a pivotal moment of maturity. It reframes love not as a destination or a cage, but as a supportive force that encourages growth. The introduction of the Alchemist, a figure of immense power and quiet wisdom, shifts the story into its most mystical phase. He does not give Santiago answers, he gives him challenges. He forces the boy to look deeper into the soul of the world, to see that the wind, the sun, and the hand that wrote it all are one and the same. The boy's transformation is nearly complete as he prepares to face the desert once more, not as a shepherd or a laborer, but as a man who can speak to the elements themselves. The stakes are no longer just a hidden treasure of gold, but the very survival of his soul in the face of the infinite. Each step forward is a step away from the boy he was and a step toward the master he is destined to become. The desert is a cruel mistress, demanding a price for every secret she reveals. And as Santiago stood at the edge of the oasis, the weight of his choice pressed down upon him like the burning sun. He had found water, safety, and a love that felt like the culmination of all his wandering. Fatima was the scent of the desert wind after rain, the stillness of the dunes at twilight. In her presence, the pyramids of Egypt felt like a ghost story from a distant life. But the Alchemist, a figure who seemed carved from the very rock and shadow of the Sahara, stood before him as a reminder of the unfinished soul. He told the boy that if he stayed, he would be a successful man for a few years, a leader of the oasis. But slowly, the omens would begin to fade. The stars would stop speaking to him, and the regret of the unfulfilled personal legend would eventually turn his love for Fatima into a bitter reminder of what he had abandoned. This is the profound psychological trap of the good enough, the temptation to settle for a beautiful plateau when the mountain peak still waits. Under the Alchemist's guidance, Santiago chose the pain of departure over the slow death of complacency. They rode out into the heart of the warring desert, a landscape now transformed into a battlefield of tribal factions. The Alchemist was not a protector in the traditional sense, he was a mirror. He constantly pushed Santiago to find the answers within his own fear. When they were captured by a local tribe and accused of being spies, the Alchemist did something unthinkable. He told the tribal leaders that Santiago was a powerful wizard who could transform himself into the wind. If the boy failed to do so in 3 days, they would both be executed. This was the ultimate crucible, a moment where the metaphysical met the physical with lethal stakes. Santiago was no longer just a seeker, he was a man standing on the precipice of non-existence, forced to command the very elements of creation. For 2 days, he sat in silence, looking out at the desert, feeling the terror of his own limitations. He spoke to the desert, asking for its help, but the desert replied that it knew nothing of such transformations. He spoke to the wind, the force that had traveled the world and seen all things. But even the wind did not know how to turn a man into a spirit. Finally, he spoke to the sun, the source of all life, the eye that sees the soul of the world. In a moment of transcendent clarity, the boy realized that he, the sun, the wind, and the desert were all written by the same hand. He reached into the soul of the world and perceived that the universe was not a collection of separate objects, but a single, pulsing consciousness. A great storm arose, a simoon that blinded the tribesmen and shook the foundations of the earth. And when the dust settled, Santiago was no longer where he had stood. He appeared on the other side of the camp. Having achieved the impossible, he had not just survived, he had become a part of the divine architecture. This segment of the narrative serves as a harrowing exploration of the dark night of the soul, the moment in every great endeavor where failure seems not only likely but certain. The Alchemist's decision to put Santiago's life on the line is a metaphor for the way life tests our convictions. It teaches us that the highest levels of mastery are only accessible when we have no other choice but to succeed. The psychological transformation Santiago undergoes during those 3 days is a shift from the ego to the essence. He stops trying to do and starts trying to be. The lesson is that we are often the only obstacles in our own path. Our fear of the impossible is what makes it impossible. By communicating with the sun and the wind, Santiago demonstrates that the language of the world is actually the language of love, the force that binds the creator to the creation. When he transforms into the wind, it is a symbolic death of the shepherd and the birth of the master. It illustrates the alchemical principle that the evolution of the self is the only way to influence the evolution of the world. We also learn the true nature of love through Fatima's sacrifice. She is a woman of the desert, one who understands that the desert takes men away and sometimes returns them, but that a man's destiny belongs to the universe, not to a person. This redefines love as a liberating force rather than a confining one. The journey with the alchemist also reveals that true wisdom cannot be taught through words alone, it must be experienced through the trials of the desert. The alchemist's role is to facilitate the boy's encounter with his own power, proving that a teacher's greatest gift is not knowledge, but the courage is to act. As they move toward the pyramids, the alchemist shares the final secrets of the craft, not by explaining the properties of mercury or sulfur, but by talking about the heart. He tells Santiago that the heart is the only thing capable of telling us where our treasure lies, but it is also a traitor that will try to distract us with fear. To master the heart is to listen to it so closely that it can never surprise you. This internal vigilance is the key to navigating the final stages of any journey. The boy learns that every second of the search is an encounter with God, and that the suffering often associated with the quest is actually the labor pains of a new life. The desert is no longer a vast emptiness to him, it is a library of omens, a temple of the spirit. As they neared the end of their shared path, they arrived at a Coptic monastery. Here, the alchemist performed a physical demonstration of the art he had mastered, turning lead into gold in a kitchen fire. He divided the gold into 4 parts, one for himself, one for the monk who hosted them, one for Santiago to replace what he had lost, and one to be held by the monk in case Santiago ever needed it again. This act was a final lesson in the fluidity of the material world. Gold was not the goal, it was merely a byproduct of the soul's alignment with the great work. The alchemist then departed, leaving Santiago to complete the final leg of the journey alone. This is the loneliness of the visionary, the moment when even the greatest mentors must step aside. For no one can touch the pyramids for you. Santiago rode for hours, his heart pounding in rhythm with the desert's pulse, until finally, he crested a dune and saw them, the great pyramids of Egypt, rising like mountains of stone against the moonlight. He fell to his knees and wept. His tears fell into the sand, and at the spot where they landed, he saw a scarab beetle, a sacred omen in the land of the pharaohs. He began to dig. He dug with his bare hands, driven by a frantic, desperate hope, his fingers bleeding against the coarse grit. He dug for hours, but found nothing but more sand. Then, out of the darkness, a group of refugees from the tribal wars appeared. They were desperate, hungry men who saw a lone boy digging in the middle of the night and assumed he was hiding a fortune. They dragged him from the hole, beat him until he was broken and bloodied, and demanded to know what he was looking for. Santiago, fearing for his life, told them the truth. He had dreamed of a treasure buried here. The leader of the bandits laughed, a cold, mocking sound that echoed off the ancient stones. He told Santiago that he was a fool, and that he himself had once had a recurring dream about a treasure buried under a sycamore tree in an abandoned church in Spain, where shepherds used to sleep with their sheep. But the bandit said he wasn't stupid enough to cross a whole desert just because of a dream. The irony of this moment is a masterclass in the psychology of perspective and the circle of destiny. The very person who nearly killed Santiago provided him with the final piece of the puzzle. It suggests that our enemies and our greatest obstacles are often the unwitting messengers of our success. The lesson here is one of profound humility and the grace of the detour. Had Santiago found the gold immediately upon his arrival in Tangier, or had he never left Spain at all, he would never have become the man who could turn into the wind. He would never have known Fatima, nor would he have understood the soul of the world. The treasure was back where he started, but the person who could claim that treasure had to be forged in the fires of the Sahara. This part of the story emphasizes that the universe often leads us in circles to show us that the destination was never a place, but a state of being. The bandit's mockery is the ultimate test of faith. He represents the realistic world that scoffs at dreams. Yet it is his cynicism that confirms the truth of Santiago's vision. The boy's journey proves that nothing is ever wasted, not the year in the crystal shop, not the loss of his sheep, and certainly not the blood he spilled at the feet of the pyramids. Every hardship was a necessary calibration of his soul. The realization that the treasure was under the tree where he had slept many times before is not a cruel joke, but a beautiful revelation of the ubiquity of the divine. It teaches us that the extraordinary is often hidden in the ordinary, but it takes an extraordinary journey to develop the eyes to see it. Santiago's laughter as he lies beaten in the sand is the laughter of a man who has finally understood the joke of the universe. He knows now that he is a author of his life, and that the hand that writes it all has a sense of humor and a deep, abiding love for those who persist. He realizes that he had to go to Egypt to learn that he didn't need to be in Egypt. This is the paradox of the personal legend: we must go far away to find what is close, and we must lose everything to find what is truly ours. The boy's journey is a road map for the human psyche, demonstrating that the path to fulfillment is a constant dialogue between the inner self and the outer world. As he prepares to return to Spain, he is no longer a shepherd, he is an alchemist of his own life, capable of transforming the leaden circumstances of reality into the gold of a life well lived. The return to the abandoned church in Spain is the final act of integration. Santiago is no longer looking for a child to lead him, he knows the way. He digs beneath the roots of the sycamore tree, and there, he finds a chest of ancient gold coins and precious stones, a fortune beyond his wildest imaginings. But as he looks at the gold, his thoughts aren't on the wealth. He thinks of the alchemist's laughter, the scent of Fatima on the wind, and the vast, silent wisdom of the desert. The gold is just a symbol, a physical manifestation of the spiritual wealth he has already claimed. This conclusion teaches us that the rewards of life are always proportional to the courage we show in pursuing them. The story ends not with the hoarding of gold, but with a promise of return. Santiago remembers the debt he owes to the gypsy woman and the Coptic monk, acknowledging the interconnectedness of all his helpers. Most importantly, he feels the wind blowing from the east, the Levanta, and in that wind, he feels the kiss of Fatima. He knows that his journey is not over, but has merely reached a new level of understanding. The treasure allowed him to fulfill his promise to the world, but his heart belongs to the path and the people he met along the way. This narrative arc provides a powerful psychological blueprint: the call, the departure, the initiation, and the return. It suggests that we must all be willing to die to our old selves to be reborn into our true potential. The Alchemist is not just a character in the book, it is a potential within every reader, the ability to take the raw, often painful materials of life and refine them into something precious and eternal. The final message is one of radical hope, that the universe is not indifferent to our struggles, but is actively participating in our growth, provided we have the ears to hear its call and the feet to follow it wherever it may lead. The final return to the Spanish hills is not a retreat into the past, but the completion of a sacred geometric circle. As Santiago strikes the earth beneath the sycamore tree and unearths the chest of Spanish gold, the physical weight of the coins serves as a grounding contrast to the ethereal lessons of the Sahara. This moment is the ultimate resolution of the tension between the material and the spiritual. Throughout his journey, the boy was often criticized by his own internal monologue for being a dreamer. Yet here is the tangible, clinking proof that the dream was the most practical thing he ever pursued. This is the core message that Paulo Coelho weaves into the very fabric of the narrative: the world is not a cold, mechanical place of survival, but a living, breathing entity that responds to human intent. The treasure under the tree is a psychological anchor, proving that when we align our internal personal legend with our external actions, the universe removes the veil between the possible and the impossible. The gold is not the end of the story, but the beginning of a new way of existing in the world. Santiago is no longer a seeker, he has become the master of two worlds, the one who can navigate the mundane realities of Spanish society while carrying the vast, silent wisdom of the desert in his soul. He has learned that the great work of alchemy is not about turning lead into gold in a laboratory, but about the refinement of the human spirit. Every person we encounter, every tragedy that befalls us, and every omen we choose to follow or ignore is an ingredient in the crucible of our lives. The boy's journey teaches us that the greatest obstacle to our success is not the lack of resources or the cruelty of others, but our own fear of suffering. As the alchemist told him, The fear of suffering is far worse than the suffering itself. By the time Santiago finds his treasure, he has suffered so much that he is no longer afraid of it. He has learned to look through the pain to see the lesson hidden within. This is the true elixir of life, the ability to remain vibrant and hopeful in a world that often tries to crush the spirit. The narrative reminds us that we are all alchemists of our own fate, tasked with the responsibility of transforming our base fears into the golden light of self-actualization. The psychological impact of the ending lies in the realization that Santiago had to go to the pyramids to find what was already in his backyard. This is a profound metaphor for the human condition. We often seek validation, happiness, and purpose in distant lands and grand gestures, only to find that the kingdom of heaven is within us and around us. However, the story insists that the journey was not a waste of time. Had Santiago stayed under the sycamore tree, he would have remained a simple shepherd, never knowing the language of the birds, the power of the wind, or the depth of his own courage. The treasure is the person he became through the process of seeking. The book challenges the reader to look at their own life not as a series of random events, but as a deliberate path filled with omens. It asks us to identify our own personal legend and to recognize the King of Salem when he appears in our lives, whether as a mentor, a book, or a sudden, inexplicable urge to change our circumstances. The story of the shepherd boy is a universal myth that mirrors the hero's journey found in every culture throughout history. It speaks to a fundamental human truth, that we are born with a purpose, and that the universe is conspiratorially helpful to those who have the bravery to pursue it. The lesson of Fatima is equally vital, that true love is a wind that pushes our sails toward our destiny, not an anchor that keeps us in the harbor. As Santiago prepares to return to the desert to find her, he does so not as a man looking for completion, but as a complete man looking for his equal. The story closes the loop on the idea that we must be whole within ourselves before we can truly share our lives with another. The gold allows him to pay back his debts and secure his future, but his eyes are fixed on the horizon, toward the woman who waited for him with the patience of the desert. This is the ultimate synthesis of love and purpose. The core message of The Alchemist is that the universe is a unified whole, governed by the soul of the world, and that our individual happiness is inextricably linked to the fulfillment of our unique destiny. It teaches that the only real failure in life is the failure to listen to one's heart and the refusal to follow the omens that guide us toward our highest selves. It is a call to action, a reminder that the language of the world is available to anyone who is willing to pay attention. The book asserts that luck is merely beginner's luck provided by the universe to give us a taste of success, but that the true path requires a persistence that persists even when the beginner's luck runs out. It is a celebration of the human spirit's capacity to transcend its circumstances and to communicate with the divine through the simple acts of living and dreaming. Santiago's laughter at the pyramids and his kiss on the wind for Fatima are the final notes of a symphony of hope. He has proven that the dreamers are the only true realists, for they are the ones who understand that reality is a fluid construct that can be shaped by the power of the soul. The treasure was always there, waiting for him to become the man who deserved it. We are all shepherds, and the world is our pasture. The only question is whether we will stay with the flock or follow the child in our dreams to the pyramids of our own making. The path is long, the desert is hot, and the thieves are many, but the gold is real, and the universe is waiting for you to claim it. The secret to a life of meaning is not in the finding of the treasure, but in the courage to seek it despite the certainty of the struggle.